Danke.
Thank you very much, Carlo Fidanza.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Now, Nagorno-Karabakh is a very, very sad history. In 1921, this particular area that was inhabited by Christian Armenians was handed over to the Socialist Republic of Azerbaijan. And thereafter, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this particular area voted for independence, but this didn't take place. It remained as part of Azerbaijan. And indeed, what we have now is a very intractable situation. A situation now where we have a violation of the various points that have been set down by the Minsk group, aggression on the part of Azerbaijan, and also expressions on the part of Turkey of its new, if you like, neo-Ottoman aspirations. So under this particular situation, great difficulties. Turkey, a member of NATO, we have to reflect on this and think about it a bit. I think the European Union ought to put in doubt, once again, numerous different aspects of the ties that it has with Turkey, a candidate for the European Union.
Bilčík Vladimir.
Mr. President, let me first express my sincere condolences to all of those who have lost their loved ones and friends in this conflict since it erupted in the Caucasus again. People are dying in the region, and we must therefore do our utmost to seek peace. Peace through international dialogue, diplomatic channels, and ultimately a lasting solution to the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Many speakers today have mentioned problems with Turkey. But the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh has its true origins in Soviet times and in Moscow. What we in the EU once saw as a ring of European friends in our neighborhood is turning into a ring of fire and enemies. We cannot stand by and look at neighborhood policy through the lenses of the last decade. If we do not change our approach to external relations, we shall remain spectators not just in Nagorno-Karabakh. It is high time to commit more resources to political and economic engagement on the ground, to our active communication, to debunking of disinformation about this conflict, as well as strategic foresight. It is high time for true European foreign policy action. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Mr. Papadakis, please. It's become tiresome to speak about this international troublemaker, Turkey. Behind all of these trouble is a regime in Turkey, in the southeastern Mediterranean, in Greece, Cyprus, Syria, Libya, and now Armenia. Unfortunately, some people in Europe want to award Turkey, which played its very important role as far as the destruction of Syria, but at the same time hosted the refugees. What hypocrisy! So now I think we find ourselves in a very, very difficult situation in the Caucasus. In Nagorno-Karabakh, once again, Turkey on the forefront. Those who are suffering are the people of Armenia. And behind the scenes here are other players as well. Russia, Iran, China. Indeed, the European Union, we ought to ask, what role does it play? Can it play a role in this very, very difficult region? Thank you very much, Mr. Paulo Rangel.
The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, first of all, means that we need to send our condolences to all of the victims, not just the conflicts from now, but those from the past as well. If there's one thing that we can see, well, we could summarize this in two key ideas. Firstly, that the European Union needs to be more active with Turkey. We cannot have a conflict with Greece and Cyprus. We can't have Turkey in Libya, Kurdistan, Syria, and now in the southern Caucasus. This is utterly unacceptable. The second key idea, Mr. Borrell, we need the EU to have an active role in this conflict. This is where we could have an active role and do what we need to do with European external policy. It's a shame that we are allowing others to take our place in this when we have the possibility to work with Armenia and Azerbaijan and be credible mediators.
Herr Vitanov Peter.
Thank you very much. Vitanov Peter.
Micro, please.
I turn it on. Yeah, it's working now.
Okay.
Thank you, President. Vice President, today when I was coming to the house, I saw young Armenians with their national flag. I believe that probably somewhere else young Azerbaijani people are also gathering. Well, there are risks. We see that in the conflict because this conflict could turn into intra-state. We have indicators for that. Regional war. In view of the warrior approach and rhetoric of Turkey, and this is a global opposition. We can see also in the position of the US, of Russia, and we call for ceasefire immediately. NATO has full responsibility, of course, with Russia and France as a co-chair of the Minsk group in order to find a peaceful solution.
Thank you very much, colleague Vitanov. And now we move to our next speaker, Mr. Lukas Furlas, for 1 minute, please. Mr. Furlas. Thank you very much, President. Mr. Borrell, the images that we've seen through the press have been very sad indeed. Numerous individuals killed, Azerbaijanis being supported by Turks, jihadists, numerous different types of new weaponry. Indeed, I ask myself, how much longer will we be confusing the victor with the victimizer? We find the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh trying to defend themselves against aggression. We need to not be tolerant at all. Those who are supporting Erdogan and Aliyev, let's not forget that they're feeding into a situation which is explosive in nature. Yesterday, Erdogan spit in the face of Europe, opening up occupied Famagusta, the closed city of Famagusta. This is unacceptable. We find ourselves, we have to stand with the people of Armenia. Let's not forget, they suffered a horrific genocide, and I think the time has come finally for all of us to stand at their side and to condemn Turkey. Thank you very much, Mr. Furlas. And now we move on to our next speaker, Sylvie Guillaume.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the 25th of September, we've had war at our doors. There has been an attack as in July last country. This is having civilian conflicts after many days of fire of the European. After many days of problem, we are seeing international institutions becoming involved. The message needs to be completely clear. We need to demand the end of all hostilities because the escalation of hostilities threatens security of the entire region. Now, following on from that, we need to focus on Turkey. They are creating this conflict. For many years, the OSCE Minsk group has talked about creating a path towards peace. This group needs to be increased so that we make sure we do not see another Armenian genocide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geoffrey Didier.
After Syria, Libya and Eastern Mediterranean, now the Turkish government, we continuing its expansionist policy, this time in Nagorno-Karabakh. The Turkish leader is trying to stimulate regional tensions and provoking a century after a genocide, new victims, above all Armenian victims. Now, faced with that, I ask the question here in this House, where is Europe, Mr. Commissioner? What are the effective responses, the firm responses, faced with this nationalist leader who is trying to wash away our values? Many members of this House, and above all from the French delegation from the EPP, we've said this, and I'll repeat it once again. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that Europe has not put an end to Turkey's accession procedure to the EU. This should be suspension, and this should, for one very simple reason: Europe is not a toy. Our values, our principles, the heart of our civilization is not negotiable.
See?
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Georgios Kirtsos. Thank you very much, President. I feel Mr. Borrell, a very, very experienced politician, and I think that very experienced politicians are there for difficult situations, indeed. So I think, indeed, the initiative has to be taken right now for a European embargo of the selling of weapon systems to Turkey, because we see the role of Turkey in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we're seeing the role of Turkey in Syria, Libya, and the Eastern Mediterranean as well. So my proposal isn't particularly unique, because already Canada, which has provided drone technology to the Turks, and it's being used right now in the war between the Azeris and Armenia. Well, now Canada has frozen these particular sales. Now, as far as the jobs that are going to be lost in Spain, if Spain is to stop selling different types of arms and naval instruments, if you like, to Turkey, well, that is a question that will have to be answered. Mr. Christoforou, please. President, colleagues, Azerbaijan, violating international law, attacked the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, helped by Syrian fighters, and Turkey. This story is a horrific one indeed. Humanity a century ago turned a blind eye to the horrific acts of the Ottomans, the genocide of Armenians, the genocide of the Greeks of the Black Sea region. And history has shown that this type of simply turning a blind eye is totally unacceptable. The time has come to recognize and to say quite clearly what is going on, that what we have here are criminal acts on the part of Turkey. The people of Armenia, with their long history and with all of that they have offered to Western civilization, they deserve our support. So the moment has come for the European Parliament, from the heart of democracy right here in Europe, to send out a message in unison, condemning what Turkey is doing, condemning what Azerbaijan is doing, and saying that we are all Armenians and we stand side by side with our people of Armenia, the bold people and courageous people of Armenia. Thank you very much. Madam Asimakopoulou is our next speaker. A couple of years ago, a historic decision of Greek justice with regard to the neo-Nazi party in Greece was announced. This organization is a criminal organization, and I would like to say that this is a moment of democracy, a triumph for democracy, that our government, Mr. Mitsotakis, moved forward with this particular trial, and that this trial came to this outcome. So Europe found a way. Europe has to respond to these types of unacceptable situations. Europe didn't respond effectively at one point to Hitler, and as a result we had the Holocaust. Europe right now has to respond to what Turkey is doing right now. What can we say? What can we say to a country which is supporting the Azeris in this conflict, a country which simply doesn't accept history, doesn't accept the fact that this genocide of Armenians took place? So I think the moment has come for us to truly confront Erdogan before it is too late. Thank you.
Danke, die Rednerliste unserer Kollegin.
Now, our next speaker is Madam Spiraki. Thank you very much, President. Mr. Borrell, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh is being supported by Turkey. It is costing hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives, because in Nagorno-Karabakh an effort is being made to conduct ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. These people have lived there. These people have lived there in peace for centuries. Turkey, on the other hand, has not even recognized the Ottoman genocide. Bombs, different types of terrible weaponry are being used on the people of Stepanakert, on the people of Karabakh as well. And indeed, Russia and Turkey seem to be playing the same role there, and that is to limit, to curtail, if you like, to block the flow of energy from the region to Europe. Let's not forget the role that the Caucasus play as a kind of crossroads of these ever so important pipelines. But I think above all, the moment has come to close these wounds of history and to give the people of Armenia and recognize that which they deserve, their rights. Thank you.
Nun den Vizepräsidenten.
At this point, I'd like to invite the High Representative and Vice President of the Commission, Mr. Borrell, to respond to the various points brought up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Thank you to all of you for your interesting and engaging remarks. I think your message is clear. It has been repeated 65 times. With different voices, but expressing the same concern and the same request to act. On the next Monday, I will bring your voice to the European Foreign Affairs Ministers' Council in Luxembourg, where we will have to follow up the situation and see what we can decide about it. But the European Council put very clear that they consider that the frame to mediate and to act on this conflict is the Ho Chi Minh's group of co-chairs. This was clearly what the European Council said. He asked me to support the work of the Ho Chi Minh's group co-chairs. That's what we are doing. But we have to let this group of people to work because it is the only one that's being recognized by the two sides. And I think that Mr. Butikofer is right when he says that there are something new in this conflict. One is that the Americans are withdrawing and Turkey is taking a stronger position, much more assertive. And the European Council also discussed about the relationship with Turkey and invite you to listen to the conclusions of the European Council, saying that in December we will take a stock of the evolution of the situation in Eastern Mediterranean and all the conflicts in which Turkey is more or less involved, in order to take decisions about how we continue our relationship with Turkey. We are going to continue calling for a ceasefire, and we'll bring your voice about it to the Foreign Affairs Council ministers. We'll remind the two sides of their obligation to protect civilians under international humanitarian law and keep working with Turkey, also with Turkey, in order to build a constructive contribution to the conflict settlement and help the efforts to stop the hostilities. We have a special representative for the South Caucasus who is there, who is in touch with the two sides of the conflict. Yesterday, the Turkish minister was in Baku, and I was really concerned when I see that he was expressing the full support of Azerbaijan. My last talk with the Azerbaijan minister was also very much worrisome, because he was clearly saying that the fight will continue until Armenia will accept a concrete schedule for withdrawing from Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a precondition for conversation, for talks. Very difficult. The situation is really becoming worse and worse. All of you have been asking to act, but I've been listening very few concrete versions of the verb act. What do you mean by act? What do you mean by act? We can do what we can do. What we can do, what we can do. But this is the way that we have to take this situation. We'll do whatever we can do in order, as I said, to support the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, which is the frame that the European Council decided to support in order to look for a solution, for a negotiated solution, pushing both sides to stop the fight and especially putting pressure on Turkey not to continue intervening, but to act. If you mean by act, taking military action, is completely out of question. We are going to do what we can do as European Union with the resources we have on the diplomatic arena, waiting for December, as the European Council has decided, to see what is going on from now to December to review our relationship with Turkey. This is what the European Council decided after a long discussion on Turkey and our relation with Turkey. And I have to stick to that. And I will obey and I will try to implement the mandate of the European Union Council in order to support the Minsk Group co-chairs that I hope this week will have meetings with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Azerbaijan. I hope also with Armenia. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Borrell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borrell. And we now close. And we come to the next point on the agenda with the Vice President of the Commission, the EU diplomatic mission in Venezuela in view of possible elections. A statement by the Vice President of the Commission, High Representative, on this particular issue, in other words, and the debate will take place as projected, as foreseen, and now the floor goes to the Vice President of the Commission, High Representative.
Señor Presidente,
President,
I could speak in Spanish because I wonder that the most important part of the members that are going to follow this debate are speaking Spanish very well. So if you don't mind, I will use the Spanish language, which, after all, is the second most spoken language in the world. Señor
President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Parliament, this plenary has already discussed the various crises that have afflicted Venezuela a number of times. It used to be one of the richest countries in the world, and the situation is one of the great tragedies of our era. And so, of course, I share your concern and your interest in the situation that Venezuela is in at the moment. Of course, not just Venezuela, but also the whole region, which is affected by the huge number of people who have left the country. Now, of course, we know the situation there. We know that Venezuelan society is profoundly split and is politically split. And we don't have the necessary unity to face this situation. This situation is one that has been set out very well in the most recent reports, and the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights. As we've said a number of times, we condemn human rights violations in Venezuela, and that's why we are working with civil society in the country and have been working with them for a long time now, particularly over the summer. I'm not going to go through the whole political situation in Venezuela. You're all well aware of it. But I would like to speak under this particular title and tell you what's happened in July. That's when we started our work to try to coordinate with the EU member states, and together with the support from our Latin American partners and the International Contact Group, we've tried to find a peaceful, democratic solution to the situation that Venezuela is experiencing. Now, of course, the first step was to try, and I emphasize try, to do something about the roadblock that is in Venezuela at the moment, and to look at whether we could have democratic elections in the country. Now, it wasn't just me going along with my suitcase off my own back, but I met with President Guaido and set out the conditions, the minimum conditions that will be necessary for a credible democratic election. Throughout the summer, in August, I was in touch. We spoke on the phone with the G4, with other opposition leaders, and of course with Maduro's government. This was all done publicly in formal settings, for example, within the ministerial contact group of the International Contact Group over summer, the Foreign Affairs Assembly on the 21st of September as well. Throughout the month of August, I was in contact and said that we didn't have the necessary conditions for any elections to be considered free and with full participation by the 6th of December. However, at the same time, I insisted both to the government and the opposition that we should try to find a way to bring their positions closer together to make it possible to have elections that the European Union could participate in as observer. This information is all entirely public and has always been. After one of the opposition leaders, Mr. Capriles, set out his intention to participate in the elections if the necessary conditions were in place, at the same time, the others under Guaido believed that it was impossible for this to happen, but they weren't against an attempt to try to delay the elections, to try to continue with their negotiations, and to continue to consider the possibility of election observation by us. As you know, the conditions were in place in the past, but after the contact group and after the meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council, both fora demonstrated support to continue contact with the government to see whether it was possible to delay the election period, and that this would be a necessary condition for anything to happen. As you know, an election observation mission starts by sending an election exploration mission, and then that presents a report on whether or not we have the necessary conditions to be able to send an observation mission. The decision to send the observation mission depends on the exploration on the ground, and that takes about 6 months. And so the 6th of December date was incompatible with this. And we decided, and everyone agreed to this, to see if the elections could be postponed. We continued to have video conferences and telephone calls over the course of 3 months. And then I decided to send 2 members of staff of the External Action Service to go on the ground to contact all of the political stakeholders and to see exactly what the state of play was. Now, this led to a certain amount of concern, as if this was some kind of novelty. But this is a perfectly usual diplomatic practice. Last year, there have been 3 contact group missions in various formats, and they were all led by a member of staff from the European Union and had the same objective. We have also worked with the Norwegian government, and they have sent a number of missions to try to put an end to the political stumbling block that we're seeing. Then EU member states were informed in writing. Now, we've been accused of acting clandestinely. Now, I don't think if you're trying to do something secretly, you send a written letter to all member states. And in Venezuela, the two members of staff met with people from a range of sectors. They met with over 70 different interlocutors. Now, they were very happy to also provide information on all of their activity, everything they did, so it's not exactly secret. There was support to try to achieve a delay to the elections. They met with the opposition as well, including the G4, to try to ensure that they would also be able to support democratic, transparent elections, and set out the conditions that I would also send out to my contacts, which I did over the months of July and August. And there were also meetings with Roberto Madero, the ex-chief of cabinet of Mr. Guaido. Sadly, he wasn't authorized to come to Spain, as had been his desire. The European Union wanted to keep all communication channels open and to provide the opportunity to talk, to try to avoid Venezuela once again seeing social and political chaos in the country. I was also able to speak to High Representative of the Maduro regime, Mr. Rodriguez, and Hector Rodriguez, and sent out they sent invitations to the European Union to observe the elections in December. However, we had a specific request. This is the first time that the European Union has been asked to observe elections. They asked for an election support mission. Now, we explained that no such thing existed, that the European Union has established rules and procedures whereby it doesn't support, it observes. And that has to go through a very specific procedure. First of all, exploration and then observation. We said that if they wanted to look at the possibilities of having an election observation mission, then there was a certain procedure that had to be followed, but that this would require delays in the elections. Otherwise, there was nothing left for us to talk about. The EU staff were not there to negotiate, but merely to pass on the message to everyone involved in the political situation and receive their replies. They had contact with the National Dialogue Association, who were against delaying the elections. They had meetings with the Episcopal Conference in Venezuela, who play a key role in society and who asked for opposition to participate in the elections, and also to provide support for the Venezuelan people facing the current crisis. We made public this meeting, as we did in a letter recently, and we said that there had to be full participation from all political institutions. They also met with people from civil society, from academia, and from business. There was a lot of support for their mission and for the European Union to try to ensure that they could provide spaces for proper dialogue. And this is our objective. The European Union is considered by all, or certainly most of our interlocutors as the only party who can speak credibly with all different stakeholders. And this is what we are trying to do. This is what we are defending. We want to see a union with a geopolitical dimension to it. The other clear message that we heard is that the vast majority of the opposition would support a delay to the elections in order to try to create time to improve the conditions under which these elections may be held, and perhaps may allow us to send an election observation mission. However, the prevailing feeling is that delaying the elections in and of itself isn't a solution. It could be a way of keeping the door open to political negotiation. As you know, however, after this mission, the regime said very clearly that they had no intention of delaying the elections because it wasn't allowed under the Venezuelan constitution. There was a very clear mandate, and it followed to a certain date, and the elections had to take place before the end of this year. Therefore, we saw no possibility of continuing dialogue in the same fashion as I set out before. We believe that the only way to open the situation up again is through dialogue and political negotiation between the forces in Venezuela. Now, it's not going to be the magic bullet to solve all of the problems the country is facing, but what we want to do is to find a way to respond to the demands of the Venezuelan people. After what happened, and having listened to everybody, and in particular having received public declarations and letters in response to ours, and a clear indication that the elections wouldn't be delayed, then the election can't and won't send an election observation mission. We have to ensure that we respect democratic standards. They are not present and continue to not be present. And as I've explained, the timetable wouldn't be realistic either. The Maduro regime says that they won't be delaying the elections and can't do so under the constitution. We will continue to support all efforts to try to find a peaceful, democratic, political solution. We will support the Venezuelan people in trying to move beyond the crisis that they're currently undergoing. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado. Agora
Thank you.
todos e agradecer a declaração.
So, thank you very much, Vice President of the Commission and High Representative, for that very detailed statement. Thank you, Mr. Borrell. Now we shall continue the debate on Venezuela. Without further ado, I give the floor to Dolores Monsiet.
Thank you. As Vice President and High Representative, and these two are very closely associated, the 23rd of September, you sent a semi-clandestine mission to talk to the Maduro regime about the elections. 7 days before, there was a report published by the UN that accused the Maduro regime of violating human rights and crimes against humanity. 6 days before, you met with the contact group to look at delaying the fraudulent elections that will be happening in Venezuela. Then you met with foreign ministers of the EU and explained the mandate. However, in both meetings, you avoided mentioning any kind of mission. So I want to know, when was this clandestine mission organized? Was it when the regime complained about the UN report? Is this a political gesture? Was it an exchange that you would send a diplomatic mission and that the regime would delay the elections, that you would guarantee some kind of exploratory election mission? All of this was done without any kind of conditions. There were you didn't ask for presidential elections. Without proper elections, we're not going to move beyond this regime or see the political detainees be freed or an end to repression. We are extremely concerned that you did not inform the 27 ministers or the Commission or the Parliament of this clandestine mission. What's even worse, that you ignored Venezuelan Democrats who represent Juan Guaido, who is recognized by this Parliament and 25 member states. This is a whole chain of lies and half-truths. This is proof of anti-democratic contacts. We want you to explain the truth. The mission was a tool that you used to work with the regime. This is this is a win for Maduro, and he can act against the Venezuelan people with more violence and lead to more poverty. We cannot accept this.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. Mr. Borrell will have an opportunity to reply. I'd like to give the floor now to Mr. Javi Lopez for 1.5.
Thank you, President. I'd like to start by saying in my own name and on behalf of my group to defend and welcome any efforts that the High Representative has made through European democracy to try to find a democratic, peaceful solution to the serious situation in Venezuela, and also the consequences that's having on the region and in humanitarian terms, because that's the only way out, and that has to be the European position. Therefore, diplomacy and dialogue to have a solution with certain democratic conditions is the only way out. Secondly, I would like to share some thoughts with you. Often here we lament our irrelevancy in international conflicts where we can't find solutions. We hear this a great deal. Now we have a conflict such as the one in Venezuela. This situation is extremely serious. And here we have the ability to be constructive and to be involved in dialogue. And here, where we can do something, and when we are doing something, you come up with these fabricated arguments. Venezuela is extremely important to the EU. We've discussed it 6 times. There have been 13 resolutions in 5 years. There's nothing we've discussed as much as Venezuela. That shows how important it is. But more so, we, of course, have to remember the impact it has on Spanish politics. You can see that from the list of speakers. But we have to remember what's really important here is the Venezuelans and the pain that they are suffering.
Muito obrigado. Tenho agora a palavra.
Thank you very much. Jordi Caneas, 2 minutes.
Gracias, presidente. Señor Borrell.
Thank you, Mr. Borrell. We asked you to appear before this chamber to give us some explanations. We're expecting to hear excuses, but you haven't told us the truth. And this is key, because you weren't sent, you weren't asked to postpone the election. That was something that you did. It wasn't Guaido or the G4 who suggested that, it was you. And so, if you're going to put forward your justifications and admit the truth, then that's not acceptable. You were the one who had negotiations with the regime, saying that we need certain conditions to have these fraudulent elections. The government is illegitimate. The opposition is who this chamber recognizes as the legitimate government in Venezuela. So once again, we're saying no to the regime. We did that again in August, and yet in September you sent this mission And what did you suggest? Just delay these fraudulent elections without having minimum conditions for proper elections to be held. What kind of message are you sending out? It's a terrible message that you're sending to the whole of Venezuela. You can pretend to reach some kind of agreement, but there is no legitimacy to call these elections. As you know, the Maduro government is waiting for the end of the mandate. So as you know, on the 6th of December, you know that the elections won't be democratic and their results can't be recognized. Are you going to continue to support the mandate of this assembly so that or allow Venezuela to have proper democratic elections? This has to be the strategy of the European Union. The assembly has to be the only proper democratic body, and it is this way that we can have proper, free, democratic elections in Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mariani, now for 1 minute. Venezuela is a subject that comes back to this chamber in Brussels as often as the rain does. In December 2019, I said that Nicolas Maduro's policies were not my own. Ones that affect the population negatively aren't mine either. The European Union has to have a different voice that doesn't push towards utilitarianism nor collectivism. In a previous vote, I've justified my votes in the past on Venezuela. I abstained on text that lacked direction and that promised Mr. Guaido as a candidate for the European Union when it's actually up to the Venezuelan people to decide which policies to be applied to restore calm to this country. In January 2019, I insisted on the American sanctions were issues that perhaps were affecting the population of Venezuela negatively, and that there was an attempt to carry out cultural hegemony and economic hegemony over different parts of the world. I think things are not changing at all. Nothing is making progress, and we're not actually seeing any new elements brought to the table. Thank you very much. Mr. Urtasun, now for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. I have the impression that once again we're talking about Venezuela, thinking about the position of the Spanish government than having a proper debate, as we should be as the EU on about this subject. My problem is that what do we suggest? We've been talking about this for 2 years since Mr. Guaido has been recognised, and where's it got us? What can we suggest? The only solution is what the High Representative is trying to do, to work with the government to try to have proper, free, fair elections. That's the only solution. The mission, as the High Representative clearly said, is a standard tool of European democracy. And if I may say this to the Spanish delegations from the EPP and Renew, it seems quite a strange way of defending democracy in the world. If you sign letters to our institutions together with the Spanish extreme right, why are we working with those who are attacking democracy here inside our own borders?
Thank you very much. Mr. Touch, now for 1 minute.
The only people attacking democracy and defending dictatorships, a drugs-based regime, as has just been referred to in the United Nations, are you. It's the parties in government in Spain, and I think it's a disgrace. And this is at the heart of the problem that is of such concern to all Democrats and to people who want to change the criminal Maduro regime. The Maduro criminal regime can't be allowed to continue through these elections, which are going to be a farce. You can't have proper elections with Maduro in power. The Spanish government And many people sadly suspect, together with the help from Mr. Borrell, they're trying to find a way to organize these elections that will allow Maduro to stay in power. But with Maduro in power, you can't have free elections in Venezuela. And anyone who says so is undermining Europe, Venezuela, and the world.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. Mano Pineda now for 1.5 minutes.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Mr. Borrell, here we are once again talking about Venezuela, as we do in almost every plenary. As you know, at its heart, this debate is not about Venezuela. It's about a vision of democracy and how the Spanish right and extreme right see it. And the role that you want the EU to play in its foreign relations. This debate has not been organized because the EU has sent out a mission to try to continue dialogue with Venezuela, but you're not recognizing diplomacy and dialogue and democracy. What's the solution? The previous speaker has asked for military intervention against the Spanish government because they're not recognizing the result of the elections in Spain. Is this what you're asking for? Violence is their only solution. The people who asked for this debate if they declare the Spanish government to be illegitimate, then what's the result of this? If they want Mr. to be in charge of Spain or sending out, or should be the ambassador of the European Union. Mr. Borrell, be very careful in how you act. Please continue with your dialogue. Yes, you'll be criticised. And there will be future absurd debates in this parliament. But we have to continue to work for democracy. There's going to be elections. And the elections will be on the 6th of December in Venezuela. And we need to see free and fair elections. There is no...
But não terminou seu tempo.
I'm sorry, you used up your speaking time. You went beyond your speaking time. You went beyond your speaking time. You went over it quite a lot. Now we're going to continue. Is it?
He has... He's accused me of promoting a coup d'etat in Spain. All I asked is that our country should comply with its constitution in all institutions. I defend the Spanish constitution. This gentleman does not. He is an ally of terrorists.
Muito obrigado. O colega tinha a oportunidade de intervir no final do debate.
If you want to speak at the end of the debate, you can do so, but I understand you already have. I now give the floor to Mr. Tajani for 1.5 minutes.
We have to be consistent. We can't defend the rule of law in our continent, in Belarus, and then not defend it in Venezuela. The regime has been accused by the UN of crimes against humanity. You, High Representative, have organised a mission to negotiate with this dictator. This has led to a farcical situation which has only supported Maduro and his regime. Do you know what Carlota is? It's a military base in the centre of Caracas, which is used for private planes and the regime's planes to land. How is it possible that the European mission has been able to use this military airport? Has this mission been organised with the Maduro regime? Who suggested that you could land in Carlota? Who contracted this plane? Where did you land? And who's paid for the flight? what objectives did you achieve? Maduro, has he said that he's going to allow free elections with proper observation, using proper software, with free participation? But the regime, is it going to stop illegally financing European parties that are in power in Spain and Italy, for example, as some journalists have asked you? To conclude, Maduro is trying to avoid having presidential election, using the pretext of having elections to renew the Legislative Assembly. But the Legislative Assembly has already been voted for. So now is time to elect a new head of state.
Muito obrigado. Dou agora a palavra
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Leitão Marques for a minute and a half. Mr. President, we were supposed to be debating COVID-19 here, the public health situation, the unemployment, the fact that people are losing hope. There are more than 300,000 victims in Latin America, and we could have used this debate that the Socialists and Democrats wanted, that we support those countries, countries with which we have cultural and historical ties. We could have talked about how the pandemic was driving people into poverty. Millions of people, children unable to go to school, unable to be educated because of the lack of computers. And instead we have a debate about the political crisis in Venezuela. Yes, sure, there's a crisis, but there's no new proposal. There's no new way out of the crisis being put forward. The Vice President, High Representative, tried to help organize elections, but I don't see anything here happening to help Venezuela or the Venezuelan people. Thank you. Dita Charanzova, next 2 minutes.
Gracias. Señor Alto Representante.
Thank you. High Representative, how is it possible that this chamber, the European Parliament, learns about this mission to Caracas after the press? Your mission to negotiate with a dictatorship. Is this the new EU external policy towards Venezuela? No, it is not. No. You are the High Representative and you acted independently. You said in the press that the Venezuelan opposition asked you to negotiate with the dictatorship. So I'm asking you now, specifically, who was it from the opposition who charged you with this? So far, in all of my contact with representatives of President Guaido and the democratic opposition, I haven't heard anything about this request. We want to be clear to all of the democratic opposition in Venezuela and all of our friends in Venezuela. Firstly, the European Parliament doesn't recognize Maduro, and we recognize that there cannot be a transitional government that he is in. We recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate interim president of Venezuela. Without free presidential elections, under the proper conditions, then progress cannot be made with the legislative elections. The European Parliament has already been very clear on its position towards Venezuela. Actions such as that one undermine our ability to act as a European Union in a credible way on the world scene.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Paolo Borchia.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. High Representative, I have to share my concern about your approach towards this issue. Today, over 5 million Venezuelans live outside of the borders. They've been forced to flee. Due to the regime. The World Bank says that on average they're living on sets the poverty thresholds at €2 a day, and Venezuelans are living on less than that. The IMF says that there is 15% inflation for 2020. So I would like to send a message to European and Italian citizens who live in Venezuela under Maduro, without drinking water, without fuel, without gas, without any proper industry, without resources or hope. And colleagues, when we talk about sanctions, we have to remember that the Venezuelan people are experiencing the worst of these. These sanctions are the same as communism.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Jordi Soler. 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Mr. Borrell, I have to admit, I don't really know why we're having this debate. I don't really understand it because certain parties, particularly the right and extreme right,
Very much. And now Mr. Sanchez Amor has 1 minute.
Thank you. This debate on Venezuela is interesting, but what we're supposed to be talking about is the mission. Montserrat, Cañas, Lopez, Sanchez, Bilbao, Lopez, Miramon. These are the names on the list. This is a Spanish debate. We're seeing that the Spanish right is having this debate here. The problem is not that Mr. Borrell has a mission. We also have to remember that I just want Mr. Borrell. If it was Mr. Dombrovski, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Muito obrigado ao deputado.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Bilbao Barandica.
Bilbao Barandica por 1 minuto.
1 minute.
Gracias.
Thank you. Helping promoting a peaceful solution based on dialogue and a long-lasting solution to try to solve the humanitarian, social and political tragedy that Venezuela is experiencing is what we should be focusing on. And here's what unites us here. What unites us is that every observation, any kind of inquiry says that in Venezuela today, they don't have the necessary conditions for free democratic elections. We have to remember that millions of people in Venezuela deserve that we help them in recovering their liberty. And they are asking us to focus on their rights and their fundamental liberties. They are the main tools used by those who oppose the Maduro regime, and they're asking for the European Union to help them. Any debate that sows doubt about our basic agreement on this will help Maduro, and it will allow him to suggest